StoryCon presents Backstory, a podcast featuring writers, readers, and their stories, hosted by bestselling author Jennifer A. Nielsen.
Welcome, everybody, to the Backstory podcast, sponsored by Operation Literacy. Now, if you are not already a subscriber, go ahead and hit that subscribe button now. If you'd like to rate and review it, we would very much appreciate it. It means a lot to us. And I know you're going to want to be a subscriber, especially after today's podcast guest. I'd like to welcome here Marissa Meyer. Marissa, welcome to the podcast.
Oh my gosh, Jennifer, so lovely to talk to you, and thank you so much for having me.
Oh, we are just beyond thrilled. This is just such a big deal. To open, I'd love to just read a little bit of your bio, just so that the 2 or 3 people who don't already know exactly who you are will get the opportunity to know you better.
Sounds good. I'll fact check it while you read. I'll let you know.
Yes, at any point, you're like, wait, no, but I think we're good here. All right, so Marissa Meyer, she is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of The Lunar Chronicles, Heartless, the Renegades trilogy, and Instant Karma, as well as the graphic novel duology Wires and Nerve, and her first middle grade novel, Let It Glow, co-written with author Joanne Levy. Marissa holds a BA in creative writing from Pacific Lutheran University and a master's in publishing from Pace University. In addition to writing, Marissa hosts the Happy Writer podcast. She lives near Tacoma, Washington with her husband and twin daughters. All right, Marissa, did I get that right?
You got it right. No, that was totally accurate. Nicely done.
Well, now the hardest part is over. We can coast through the rest. Marissa, can you tell us a little bit about yourself as a child? What were you like as a little girl?
Yeah, I had a big imagination, which might surprise nobody. I was that kid that I would spend recesses largely by myself, singing songs. There was like this little wooded area right off of the school playground, and I liked to just kind of like walk around and pretend that I was in a fantasy world and I was slaying dragons, or I was a princess, or I was very much in my own head, always coming up with my own fantasies, my own stories. I enjoyed school. I was very academic. That's where I got to hear a lot of stories, and I loved spending time in the library. So I think the big imagination is probably the thing that makes me the most who I am, the thing I remember most about childhood. I'm trying to think what my family, like my uncle would say that I was very determined as a child. He is a big barrel-chested guy, and we would roughhouse sometimes. And even though I was clearly outmatched, I refused to give up. I never give up on anything once I start. And then my dad would call me sassy because I had a little sass, but what little girl doesn't?
Yeah, sass is perfect.
Yeah, so those are the things that I remember.
So this big imagination and all the things you could do in your mind, did the other kids on the playground, did they get you?
And some friends, of course, and we would, play house and play make-believe, but I could also be bossy, and so I really wanted to control the story, and so I think that could be difficult. You have to learn to let other people in and have their own, ideas and contribute, which is a good skill to learn. I mean, I do remember, like, the one time I ever got in a fight. It was on the playground. I would have been in 1st grade, and I saw a boy who was a couple years older than me picking on another boy. I don't know why or what their little thing was about. But again, I had all of these ideas of being a knight in shining armor, or a ninja, or just like whatever was in my head, and I was very righteous. And so I marched over to him and told him, "You can't talk to someone like that. How dare you?" And he punched me. And it was the only time I ever got punched. But to this day, I'm like, well, you didn't win that fight, Marissa, but good job.
No, but in a way, I think you did, right? Like, you may have been the one who ended up on the ground, but that you never even questioned that you were going to defend that boy speaks a lot about who you are. Because I would imagine you're still that person, would you say?
That's a great question. I like to think so, but I don't think of myself as a brave person or a courageous person. I think it appeals to me to write about characters who are brave and courageous, because I think that every time you write about one, or even read a book about characters who are bold enough to do what they know is right in the world, I like to think that we internalize a little bit of that every time.
Oh, I definitely agree. And you said you were intellectual. Where did you excel, and where did you struggle in school?
Well, anything to do with books or writing. I loved it. I loved stories, loved literature, struggled a lot with history, which as an adult, I look back and I think, but history is really just a story. And I think that if it had been taught to me more like a story, and there's ways, and of course, you've written amazing historical novels that show the story inherent in these time periods, and that's how you get kids to care. For whatever reason, it was my least favorite class, but as an adult now, I love it. I love history.
Yeah, I think history, it's very much how it's taught. And I was lucky to have some really amazing history teachers. And I think when it's taught well, it's the best subject in the school. And if not, it's a good opportunity for nap time.
Yes.
A lot of people. So you said you were very engaged with books. What books most lit up your imagination during your school years?
Yeah, anything by Roald Dahl. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, that was my go-to. I read that so many times. Anne of Green Gables was a beloved book, as it is for so many. Yeah, and then in 5th grade, my uncle, same uncle that I would wrestle with, he's really into fantasy and science fiction, and he gave me The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. And that, I so clearly remember reading those books over the summer. Must have been, I don't know if it was the summer of 4th to 5th or 5th to 6th. But it just changed my worldview of writing and what books could do. They were the first books, I'd read the Narnia books, but even the Narnia books, they start in our world and then open up to a new one. Lord of the Rings were the first books that I read that were a completely different universe and different creatures and different language. And I just remember being amazed that a writer could create something that was 100% their own. And I found that really, really influential. Yeah, so those were definitely some of the bigger ones.
I am a huge fan of the Lord of the Rings movies, Peter Jackson's movies. And I remember that there was an interview he did as he was making the movies. And one of the things he said in that interview, which speaks so well to Lord of the Rings, but also to the movies, is he said, I want people to believe, people know that Middle Earth never existed, but I want to make a movie so that they believe it could have existed.
Mm-hmm.
And that line for me as a writer has always really stayed with me, to write a world that even if you know it didn't, you want to believe it could have.
Absolutely. No, finding those details that really make it authentic and you could just see yourself there. You can smell the smells on the wind. You can feel the texture of the clothing. That's the magic that we're trying to create.
Oh, exactly. Exactly. And so you do create it. Did you always want to be an author? Was this always your path?
I did. And I had detours growing up. I started wanting to be a writer at whatever age I realized that was a job. I don't know what age that was, but at some point you're like, hey, all of these books that I love have names on them. What does that mean? Who are these people? And how do I get to be one of them? So that was always with me. Growing up, I did go through periods, there was a time when I wanted to be a singer on Broadway. Sadly, I can't sing. But I love musical theater, always have. There was a time when I wanted to be a fashion designer. Again, I don't really like clothes that much, so why did I think that was a good idea? But there was appeal to it. There was something about it that I liked. But I would always, always come back to wanting to be a writer.
Wow. All right. Well, since you brought it up, I have to ask, do you have any top 3 musicals or top 1 musical?
Well, top 1 has been Wicked for me for ages, which I went and saw Wicked for the first time when my husband and I were newly dating, and it was coming to Seattle, and it had sold out, of course, immediately. But there was all these billboards everywhere, and we'd only been dating for maybe a month, and we drove by a billboard, and I said, oh, I wanted to get tickets to that so bad, and they were sold out, and I'm so bummed. And so he went and got tickets on the secondhand market, but they were VIP tickets where we got to go into the special room in the theater and have cocktails beforehand. And then they were like front row balcony seats. They were the best seats in the theater. And I remember distinctly thinking, like, I have to marry this guy. Like, he has won. I'm done.
Yeah.
Yes. And it was just that musical just absolutely blew me away. And of course, the movie is spectacular and I love it.
Yeah, you're speaking to my soul there. All right. So we just did a big sidetrack. But when did you first try your hand at serious writing? Like, I believe I could be an author. I'm going to give it a go.
Yeah. So kind of two parts to that answer. The first was when I started getting into fan fiction. When I was 14, I started writing fan fiction for the anime Sailor Moon, which was a huge passion. And that was the first time when I was brave enough to share my writing, because even though I'd been writing little stories and little plays and things my whole life, they had always just lived in my little spiral notebooks and I didn't want to show them to anybody. But when I discovered fan fiction and the fandom and, you know, these wonderful supportive communities online, I started putting my stories up and getting just wonderful feedback, and people were so encouraging. And that, I really credit fan fiction so much, not only with learning so much about the craft and the mechanics of writing, but that sense that, you know, if I want to do this, I need to be consistent. Like, if I have readers waiting for the next chapter, then I'm going to post a chapter every Sunday, you know, and I'm not going to wait to be inspired, and I'm not going to get writer's block because people are waiting for it. And that really instilled in me a sense of, you know, you have to just keep writing and push past the difficult parts of writing because there's someone out there who's waiting for this story. So that was really huge. And then I started attempting to write my first novel when I was 16. Did not finish a novel for 10 years, but that was the first go at it when I was 16.
Do you remember what the story was about?
Oh, yes. I still have it somewhere. It was a fantasy. I mean, like so many people, my first number of novels were loosely veiled Lord of the Rings fan fiction. I was trying to recreate that magic. Mine had a lot more female characters and a lot more romance.
All right. So you're kind of writing in the background. You have this, you know, fan fiction that you've been working on, but it's not where you started for your career. You started in publishing, right?
Yeah.
What was your job?
Yeah. So, right. So I have a minor in the printing and publishing arts. And right out of college, I had interned at a book publisher in Seattle that specialized in fine art books. So like the really beautiful coffee table books that they sell at like in the museum gift stores, that's kind of what their specialty was. And so after I graduated, they hired me on full time, and I started out as an editorial assistant and did a lot of typesetting, a lot of proofreading, eventually moved up to, I can't even remember what my official title was at this point, editor-ish, something editor, I don't remember. But yeah, so that's what I did.
What did you learn from that?
A lot of things. And it's funny because it didn't teach me hardly anything about the craft of writing, because just such a totally different, nothing to do really with fiction. But I learned a lot about the aesthetics of books and typography, which doesn't come into play a whole in my writing career, but definitely there's little things that I pick up when I'm going through my own page proofs. Like, could we change this hyphen here because it makes it more readable? Just little things. But really just seeing the background of what stages a book goes through the publisher, through editorial and design and proofreading, and through the publishing or the actual printing process, all of this. It was really handy when then my first books were getting published to know what was happening behind the scenes, because publishers aren't always the great at communicating with the author where their book is in the process. And there can be weeks or months in which, like, you don't hear anything. And as a new author, especially, that can be really scary. And so for me, it kind of helped me to know, like, okay, they're doing their job and I don't need to be involved in that. And that's why I'm not hearing anything. And that's okay. Oh, another thing, being on the editorial side and working with different writers, curators, artists, you really come to appreciate the people who are team players and the ones who recognize you're doing your best, the ones who don't. So definitely being able to see the different personalities of authors and writers told me I know which one I want to be when it comes to getting published.
Ooh, that's interesting. You mentioned the fan fiction. Do you ever go and read fan fiction written for your books?
No. No, I love that it's out there. I love that it's out there because I know how much fan fiction comes from the heart, and that people do it because they really love and really connected with the source material. And so I just think it is the biggest honor that people write fan fiction or make fan art or cosplay, all of that. But I think fan fiction is for the fans. I don't think it's for the original creator.
For you, we kind of got a little look at, child you. Would you describe yourself as a risk taker?
Would I describe myself as a risk taker? Hey, I don't know. I like trying new things. I always want new experiences. I love to travel. I love to take classes and try new cuisines, recipes. I don't know how much I see those as risky endeavors. I mean, I think there's some inherent risk to whenever you're doing something you've never done before. But I don't know. I don't know if I'd call myself a risk taker.
Interesting.
Maybe it's somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, well, and it doesn't it's not a yes or a no sort of thing. It's a spectrum. How about adventurous?
To a degree. Depends on the adventure.
Like at the point you're physically in danger. You're
Cut me out. And there's things, I'm not super outdoorsy. I enjoy a relaxing hike every now and then. I'll enjoy going kayaking once in a blue moon. But we're not a camping family. But I love going new places and seeing new things. So, yeah, a different kind of adventure.
That's still an adventure, right? Just with fewer bugs.
Fewer bugs, fewer chance of getting eaten by a bear.
Yeah. Well, I live in Utah. That's a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, not eaten by a bear. Sorry. Come to Utah. It's lovely. But okay.
We have lots of bears in Washington, too.
We all, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you a curious person?
So curious. So curious. I want to know all the things all the time.
Mm-hmm. All right. Organized.
Very organized. Maybe to a fault.
How so?
Because I am a homeschooling mom and I've got 2 children and we are all here all the time. And the lifestyle of homeschooling does not always make for the best organization. There are art projects everywhere, science experiments everywhere. They start one project and leave it out, and they start playing one game and they leave it out. And there's books and drawing supplies everywhere all the time. And it can make me want to scream. But I also know that this is what we've chosen and I see the benefit to the chaos. So I try to
Zen.
let it go.
Oh, absolutely. All right. We talked about being prepared to take hold of the lightning when it strikes. And in this case, lightning being a great thing. When did it strike for you as an author? That moment that you knew it was like something great was happening.
So my agent sent out Cinder, was my debut novel, and pitched it as a 4-book series. And she sent it out to publishers on a Friday. And I knew I have a background in publishing. I've read all the publishing guides, writing guides. I know about rejection and the wait and the long slog and your first book on submission. It may not happen. Keep writing, keep going, blah, blah, blah. I was very mentally prepared for the long wait here. On Monday, after she submitted, we had an offer and it went to a multi-publisher auction. And pretty much at that point, I realized not only is this book going to sell, but there's already buzz building about it, which was it's a huge swing because as a writer, you have no objectivity about what you've written. We love what we've written, but we don't know if anybody else will love it. And there was a lot of things about this series that I was like, I don't know, fairy tales, a cyborg Cinderella. It's kind of weird. Like, what if everyone is just like, that's a strange premise and it doesn't go anywhere? But then when it started to get a lot of attention really early on, I started to think, okay, maybe I'm not the only one who thinks this is really cool.
Was there a specific moment, something that happened where, I mean, there's the auction, of course, where but like in the greater universe of reviewers or websites or something where you're like, oh my gosh, this is going to be big.
This was after publication and maybe even a couple years, but like one of the biggest like wow moments was when Cinder was, I guess the answer is a technical term, in Jeopardy, on a Jeopardy clue. And then it was like, that's a level that I did not foresee ever getting to. So that was kind of a really wow moment.
Yeah, it's when you realize like you've built something bigger than you are. Like
Yes.
now it's part of the pop culture. It's part of the conversation of things. And so here you are, you're still relatively, I mean, you're young. You're young at this time that this book has come out, and all of a sudden it just explodes. And I know it did. I released The False Prince the same year. And
That's
that was
right.
great. But everybody's talking about Cinder so much that I was very, very aware of that just big moment. And so, I think we spend a lot of time trying to prepare authors. You said you were prepared to deal with the failure. I also believe there's problems that come with success, and we don't talk about that. We don't prepare each other for that. As young as you were and now hitting this amazing success, what other sorts of things started to happen for you?
Yeah, so it is funny, and there are unique challenges, like you say, to success. One of the biggest ones I felt was just the pressure of having new voices in your head, not only editors and reviewers and, critics, but the readers who really loved the first book or the first series. And for me, as much as I loved the Lunar Chronicles, I knew that once that series was over, I was ready to move on. And I had other ideas, and I wanted to write about superheroes, and I wanted to write sweet contemporary romances and all of these things. And you worry that the readers aren't going to want to follow you, that they're going to be like, no, this is what you got me on. I want more of this. And I'm sure that's true for some readers, but it really takes a little bit of courage, and you have to follow the inspiration. You have to think like, this is my career and I'm going to be writing this book, and it's going to take me 9 months to a year where I'm going to be stuck in this world with these characters. What am I passionate about right now? And you just have to hope that this book is also going to find its readers.
Backstory is brought to you by StoryCon. StoryCon is the evolution of Teen Author Boot Camp, the largest combined writing camp and fan expo in the Intermountain West. Join us on February 21st and 22nd, 2025 at the Salt Palace Convention Center in Salt Lake City, Utah. The event will feature keynote speeches and masterclasses from internationally best-selling authors like Jeff Kinney, Neil Shusterman, Shannon Hale, Marissa Meyer, and many more. Other activities include an exhibitor hall that's free to the public, writing contests, and the Operation Literacy Awards Gala. Visit storycon.org today to register. That's StoryCon.org. Hurry, masterclasses have a limited space.
So to that light, have you ever experienced imposter syndrome?
Oh my gosh, every day. Are you kidding?
Then how do you deal with this idea of someday everybody will figure out I'm a fraud and I have no clue what I'm doing? How do you manage that?
Yeah. When I'm writing, I just try really hard to think about the book. I don't think about the readers. I don't think about the market or publishing or what is my editor going to think about this. I just try to fully immerse myself in the story and ask, what can I do to make this book the best that it can be? And you just have to stay there, to follow the craft, to do the best that you can with every book. And when those little voices start to creep in, I think it's great to remind yourself about your successes and your accomplishments. Not necessarily like the praise, because again, that can come with its own problems, but the things that are like, you know what? I did write a book, or I did finish this manuscript, or I did totally write that chapter last week, or I totally hit my word goals last month, or whatever it is, that says that you're a writer. You're doing it. You're making it happen. So I think it's really important to remember the things that you've accomplished and know that that's it. That's what makes a writer.
Oh, perfect. Perfect answer. I'm going to remember that a very long time. Where do you get your inspiration from? Or can you give us an example from one of your books about where its origin was?
Everywhere. You know how it is. Everywhere. Yeah. So, the idea for the Lunar Chronicles came in a dream. I saw Cinderella And in my dream, she lost a foot instead of a shoe. And I woke up and thought she's a cyborg. So that kind of spurred on that series. I've gotten ideas from song lyrics, from magazine articles, from things that I've overheard people saying. I've gotten ideas from signs spotted on the side of the road. I mean, every book you read leaves little nuggets in your imagination, and you just don't know at what point your imagination is going to like pull a little thing from this book and a little thing from this movie and a little bit from this, museum exhibit you saw. And yeah, their ideas are from everywhere.
I'm curious, the sign at the roadside, was that Renegades?
That was Renegades.
What was the sign?
I don't know. No, that's not entirely true. It was like one of those, it was a construction zone, and it was one of those like coming soon to this location signs. I don't know what was coming soon to that location, but when I just caught a glimpse of it out of the corner of my eye, I thought that it said Hero School. And so my mind started, going a million miles a minute. And I was thinking, what if there was a school for superheroes? And what if there was also like a rival school for supervillains? And what if a hero met a villain and they fell in love, not realizing that they were supposed to be enemies? And I wrote 5 drafts of that book trying to get the school rival thing to work. And it just didn't work. And I ended up taking out the school subplot entirely. But that idea of the hero and the villain falling in love was kind of the heart of it.
Yeah, loved that one so much. For you, what does your writing process look like? You've got this idea and you're working it together. Now you've got to put it into a draft to send your editor. What happens between those 2 points?
Yeah, so a lot of research. I almost always start with research. And that goes for all genres. I mean, if it's, of course, sci-fi, I just did a deep dive into technology and what might this futuristic world look like. But even with contemporaries, knowing that I was going to be writing a book set on the beach in California, did a lot of research into, okay, what kind of shops might they have? What is the weather like this time of year? I knew there was that in Instant Karma, a lot of it was going to take place at a sea mammal rescue center, which came from a magazine article that I read. And so, okay, let's learn about caring for sea mammals. So a lot of research. And as I'm researching, I'm gathering ideas for scenes, for subplots, for other characters. I'm starting to figure out who is my protagonist. What do they care about? What is their goal? What is in the way of that goal? Who is my love interest? And what is attractive about them? But also, what is keeping these characters apart from each other? And I'm putting all of those into a file, collecting lots of ideas. And once I feel like I have enough to start generating a story, I will use the Save the Cat plot beat to start creating an outline. And figuring out, okay, we go from step 1 to step 2, and now I'm over here at step 6. What needs to happen in between? And once I have a fairly loose outline, I don't do big detailed outlines, just a line or 2 to represent each scene, then I start drafting.
Interesting. How much of yourself do you put into your books or your characters?
It's hard to quantify. I definitely think that there's a little bit of me in every character, whether not necessarily intentionally. I think that just to write a character authentically, you have to understand them or relate to them on some level. And so just naturally, I think there's little bits of things of me in each of them. And then what you care about and what you're curious about and what you're passionate about are just naturally going to become themes in your writing. And I don't plan these things. I don't generally think a lot about theme or morals or anything like that until afterwards and the book is written and the book is done. And then I can look back and think I thought I was just writing a silly romance, but turns out there's actually a lot to do with environmentalism, and yeah, I care about that. So that just kind of happens because it's a book that you're writing from your heart, and so the things that you love just kind of tend to make their way into it.
Yeah, which is why I always think we need more writers, right? To round out all of the perspectives, all of the things that we care about that we don't have enough perspective yet. We need aspiring writers. We need you.
You may not know that you care about something until you read a book about it.
Oh, I love that. Marissa, in public, do you ever get recognized?
I do, not a lot. But I once in a while, I remember going to the fair. We have a wonderful autumn fair that comes through every year. And a few years back, my mom and I went one day and we were going parking and I'm driving and we pay for parking and the woman hands me my thing. Okay, thank you. No problem, Marissa. Have fun. It's like, thank you. I did. Oh, also, actually, probably one of my favorite memories of being recognized was my family and I went to Disney World, and we were on the shuttle bus taking us from the hotel to Disney World early in the morning. And I didn't even realize it at one point, but I'm sitting there talking to my brother, who was there with his kids as well. And a teenage girl sitting in the back of the shuttle had recognized me and she started to cry. And people were like, what's happening? And so we kind of figured out that she was a big fan. And so we chatted for a little bit anyway. And then afterwards, my brother was like, how come nobody ever cries when they meet me? Sorry.
Not going to happen. Is that a weird thing? Because you're there with your family, you're in mom mode, and all of a sudden the author you has to come.
Yeah, it is weird, and not in a bad way. Of course, it's so flattering, but I mean, I don't see myself as like a celebrity or like, I don't know. I just write books, and I'm so grateful that people like them. So it's hard to think about that there are people who, have related so strongly to what I've created that it would bring tears, but very special for sure.
Well, I have to tell you, we have a neighbor who lives just a few houses away, and one year got her a signed copy of one of your books, and she cried. So it's not only the in-person meeting, it's sometimes just knowing you had held that book. It meant so much to her. So it's one of my favorite recent Christmas memories.
Oh, I love that.
All right. So you talk about you're there with your family and all of that. I know listeners who heard the first part of this podcast are going to want to know, how did you get diapers for the baby?
I don't have a really clear memory. If I remember right, the social worker had a handful of diapers, but they were like for a toddler size. And these were, teeny tiny newborns. They were just 2 months old. So I think that we just made that work for the first day, Christmas. And then, of course, we're able to go shopping.
Okay, good. I'm one of those who really wondered.
Seems like an important detail.
It really was. It really was. I was so but there's no diapers, How has becoming a mom, how has that changed you as a writer or changed you as a person?
Oh, gosh. It changes your life, as every parent knows. I read a lot more middle grade and a lot more picture books, and that, just kind of fills my head with all sorts of new ideas. Being a mom, I think that it makes you more patient. It definitely makes you more selfless. Suddenly there are people that you have to care for before you can care for yourself. And that's a difficult thing to explain and quantify to someone who hasn't experienced yet, but it's a very quick shift that happens. But they just, I don't know, they just bring so much joy, and watching them, they're 10 years old now, and watching them to grow into little humans.
Wow.
It's just so cool. It's so cool to watch.
Oh, it is. It's the best. But you also do this podcast, The Happy Writer, which, by the way, after you subscribe to Backstory, or let's just be honest, before you subscribe to Backstory, go find Happy Writer and subscribe to it.
Well, thank you.
Amazing. But Marissa, why did you give it that name?
Because we don't talk much about being a happy writer. It's funny that in our society, it kind of sounds like an oxymoron a little bit. It's kind of like tongue in cheek. Because we have this idea of writers, or really artists in general, suffering, and that you can't create real art if it doesn't come from a place of darkness or a place of pain. And I simply do not agree with that. Not that you can't use your pain and use your trauma to translate into great art, but I don't think that you have to be miserable in order to be a writer. And I just have problems with that stereotype. And so I wanted to create a podcast that looks at writing from another angle. I love what I do. I literally think it's fun. I enjoy it. I would rather be writing than doing just about anything else in the world. Not every moment of every day, but generally speaking, I enjoy it. And I think that we don't talk enough about that, about the enjoyment aspect, about how it can actually be really fun. So I just wanted to do a podcast that talks more about what are the things that we enjoy about this.
And you are releasing a book, brand new.
I just got my copies today.
Oh, look, and it just magically appeared. Perfect.
I know, look at that.
Right. I am stoked to get my copy of this because I think it's for everybody, really, and not just for aspiring writers. Like, I think it's just going to be for everyone out there who wants to create story. So put it up there for us again so that we can just see this gorgeous, gorgeous copy.
The happy writer.
Yes. Get yours now. Absolutely. All right, Marissa, do you believe in luck?
Yes and no. I think that there is absolutely an element of luck in a lot of things, and I don't think it can be discounted. But I think that with every success story, you're going to be looking at a little bit of luck, but a lot more perseverance and a lot more hard work.
All right. And do you think that's true for aspiring writers as well?
Oh, 100%. 100%. And it's funny, I very clearly remember when Cinder came out, I was told a billion times that I was so lucky. I got a great marketing plan. I got, I was at the top of my publisher's list. I hit the New York Times the first week out. Luck. And I really internalized that. And then in my telling of the story, I started to use the word as well. I was so lucky that this happened to me and this happened to me and this happened to me. And yes, there is an element of luck. Fairy tales were kind of seeing a resurgence with like the Once Upon a Time TV show that was popular at the time. And it just hit on the market at the right time, that cultural zeitgeist that you can't really plan for. And that's the element of luck. But at one point, after I'd had a book signing and again told the world how lucky I was, afterward, my husband said to me, like, you keep saying how lucky you are, but you are ignoring the fact that you worked for this for 10 straight years. And you would get up at 5 o'clock every morning to write for an hour before you went to work. And you went through so many drafts and you had so many critique partners and you revised and you edited and you studied the market and you studied the craft and you studied publishing. It's not just luck. And I was so grateful that he pointed that out to me because it kind of shifted my whole perspective of my career at that point.
So your instant overnight success was 10 years in the making, right?
Yes, exactly. There is no instant overnight success. There really isn't.
Are there any interactions with fans that will always stay with you? Aside from the girl at Disney World crying.
Yes, that's definitely a big one. Oh, I mean, there's been so many. One of the big ones was at a book festival, and I had, done my signing, done my panels, left, went to the hotel, went to bed, and then the next day I got a call from the festival organizer, and there was a teenage girl who had come to the festival, and she got the date wrong, and she thought I was going to be there that day, not the day before. And I had an airplane to catch, but she was like, she's so distraught that she missed you. Is there any way that you can come back? Yes, of course, I've got time. So I went and I met her, and she told me that she had dyslexia and had struggled with reading her entire life, hated reading, but fell in love with Cinder and fell in love with the story and had to finish it, had to read it. And they were the first books that she finished on her own. And she, from there, had become a really active reader and a passionate reader. I've actually heard from a lot of people who have struggled with dyslexia, who then, fell in love with some of my books, and that inspired them to become readers. And so those are always just incredible stories. But I remember her a lot.
Oh, I love it. Last question. Can you give us a sneak peek of what We Could Be Magic is about?
I would love to. Thank you. So We Could Be Magic. It is a standalone graphic novel coming out this June. It's the first book that I have written for teen Marissa. The first book that I thought, if there was something that I could go back in time and put into her hands, this is the one. It's about a girl who desperately wants to be a princess character actor at a theme park that is totally not Disney because of copyright laws.
No, not Disney.
Not Disney. And she's, grown up. This has been her dream her whole life. And she gets there and she auditions, but she is a curvy girl and she does not fit the stereotype of a princess. And so instead, she is given a job at a nacho stand. And the book is about following your dreams and not letting anyone tell you what you can and can't be. And so it's a body positive book. There's of course a romance, which has my heart. It's a really sweet romance. And I just loved it. I love theme parks, amusement parks. And I just really, really enjoyed this book.
Oh, I cannot wait.
And the illustrations, Joelle Murray, the illustrator, has knocked it out of the park. It's so whimsical. It's so beautiful. The way she has done the characters is perfection. I just love it.
Perfect. All right, everybody, get it on your wish list. Pre-order now. That one is We Could Be Magic, coming out in June. Marissa, thank you so much for being here with us on this podcast. I have learned a ton, and I just feel happier.
I'm so glad.
Which is,
we all want to be happy writers.
There we go. There we go. The Backstory podcast is sponsored by Operation Literacy on February 21st and 22nd, 2025. They will be hosting StoryCon in Salt Lake City. This is the largest literary event ever to take place in the state. Marissa Meyer will be one of the featured presenters, along with so many of your favorite authors. Now, everyone has a backstory. It's the life that happens to them before they begin happening to life. It molds you and it forms you into the person you are, which means your story will always be important. Get out there now. Go tell your story.
Thank you for listening to Backstory. If you'd like to enjoy more episodes, visit us at storycon.org/backstory. That's StoryCon.org/backstory.